So, a major topic of political controversy nowadays would be the continued practice of executing criminals in what is known as the death penalty, capital punishment. It goes by many names. And while there are many limitations on the types of crimes that can result in a death sentence, this is simply just not enough. Today, I'm going to explain to you why capital punishment should no longer be allowed to continue. By the end of this speech, I will have talked about why capital punishment is an unethical practice, it is an ineffective deterrent against crime, and is also a financial burden on the people of the United States. First, the act of executing someone is unethical. It violates their basic human rights. For example, Ronald Burt Smith Jr. was to be executed on December 8th of 2016. However, during his actual execution, when they injected the chemicals into him via lethal injection, he suffered a reaction to the chemicals and underwent excruciating amounts of pain for several minutes before he finally died. Now, this is just one example of a botched execution. There are many that have happened in recent years. And allowing these to continue is a clear violation of the Eighth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution that protects against a cruel and unusual punishment. On top of this, the act of executing someone is a violation of the Sixth Commandment of the Christian religion. In America, roughly 70% of the population identify as members of Christianity. The Sixth Commandment of the Christian religion is, "Thou shalt not kill." They believe that it is not their place to determine who should live and who should die. This is something that should be left up to God and God alone. Similarly, Christians are taught to turn the other cheek. And if you're executing someone because of a crime they committed, it seems like you're doing so as an act of revenge. And the second reason we should abolish capital punishment is because it has done very little to reduce crime in America. In a study published by the Journal of Criminal Law and Criminology, they concluded that capital punishment, the threat of a death sentence, does very little to deter criminals from committing a crime compared to the threat of a life sentence without the possibility of parole. And if you look at states where there is no death penalty, there is no significant change in the homicide rates compared to states where the death penalty is practiced. So, in reality, the death penalty serves no real purpose other than just to be a waste of our resources, which leads me into my third and final point, which is that the death penalty serves as a major financial burden on the people of the United States. The costs incurred by the death penalty are far more than the costs incurred by just housing inmates for life. Specifically in California, the annual cost incurred by the death penalty is $114 million. Now, the annual cost to house an inmate for life in California is on average $34,150. Also, the trials, if there is a possibility of death sentence, are on average over $1 million more expensive to conduct than when the maximum penalty is just a life sentence. Then, after the trial, there are numerous appeals that must be performed that also raise more expenses. And then, housing inmates on death row is twice as expensive than housing them in the general prison area. Now, these costs that are incurred are paid for, you guessed it, by taxpayer dollars. They're coming out of our paychecks. And if we are to abolish death penalty, That's lower taxes to be paid. That's more money in our pockets that we can spend on whatever we want. That's always a good thing, isn't it? Now, some will argue in favor of the death penalty because they believe that these criminals deserve the punishment they're getting. And while it is true that people on death row are there because they have committed some of the worst crimes imaginable, the death penalty just doesn't serve the purpose we think it does. Crimes have not been lowered because of the death penalty at all. It's just an expensive waste of human life, is what it is. So to conclude, I have discussed reasons why the death penalty should be abolished. These reasons are because the practice of executing someone is highly unethical. It has done little to nothing to deter crime from happening and continuing. And it is a major financial burden on the people of the United States of America. So, with this information in mind, I encourage each and every one of you to take the actions necessary to see the end of the death penalty in the United States.